Present life altering circumstances have forced me to acknowledge the implications of my father wounds. When I was 6 years old, my parents split up and my father left our house for another woman to be with her, my mother's friend, and raise her children instead of me. And that was devastating, of course, as a child. I think parents really focus on making sure the kid knows that it's not their fault. And I was really aware of that. My mother would communicate that if it hadn't been for me, he would have left earlier. So really understanding that it was their marriage. But what you can't communicate to a child, not in that it's not your fault, because obviously as a child you didn't do anything to cause them to leave, but I'm understanding more in my present life because of marriage and being an adult, that what it put on you is that it's a value issue more than it is a fault issue, and that I wasn't worth sticking around for, or I wasn't worth really fighting it through for. And so it puts this unbeknownst value or lack of value that you wrestle through in childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. And it made me want to be proving all the time that I was, and the performance that would come out of that, or the grasping for approval and validation, acceptance, being tougher than the boys, those different things, and protecting my mother. Also bringing a lot of fear, of course, of abandonment. I'd have nightmares that my mom would die, and then realizing how I'd transfer when I got married. I'd have nightmares every night of my husband dying, realizing that whoever was in charge of me, that nothing could happen to them or I'd be lost. And so definitely a void and a gap, and developmental implications, and the role of a daughter, of a child, of feeling safe, yet feeling like I've got to do this, and then how you respond to the Lord, of really not believing that he would value me enough to send his only son, that he would value me enough, that it was always like, I'm sorry, I'll do better. And it's constant proving, so constant striving, and very exhausting in a relationship with the Lord. Recognizing how the father wounding as a child has wrapped back around, where I really was raised with a wonderful church family, supportive men, spiritual fathers, really surrounded pastors that I am valuable, just loving me through that. So I really received some wonderful healing, and speaking directly to those wounds of affirmation and value. Growing up really of the wonderful mother of God, constantly, every day, the Lord will never leave you or forsake you. God will never leave us, never forsake us. Aren't we lucky? And so I grew up thinking, God is my father, and the absence of really provided that I knew God was my father, because he had proven it to me. And there was an encounter that I had, I believe I was 7 or 8, where one night I was laying in bed, and it was such a cornerstone of my faith, and when I just really wanted my dad, and I just just as a kid wanting a hug from their father. And I just remember crying and saying, God, could you just be my dad? And could you just hug me? And as a child, just really asking, that's really all I wanted. The moon kind of started streaming in my room, and I felt the physical arms of the Lord come into my room and hold me and squeeze me and wrap around me so tight and affirm such love and such acceptance that I was his daughter and that he was my father. And it has become the most unshakable thing about my faith, because I've never doubted from that moment that I had a father in heaven that loved and cared very deeply for me. And had it not been for the loss and the lack and the void, I would not have been so desperate or thought myself that I could actually ask that of the Lord. And so that had really proven itself to me as a child, and that was a huge, it was a column, it was something in my life that I knew God was my father, and I was such a lucky kid to have a perfect father who would never disappoint, who would never leave me or betray me. And then I had a stepfather come into my life when I turned 13, which was fun for both of us. And working through, his first time being a dad and my first time having one as a, not a child. And so we struggled through some things, but he's been there as a father figure and is a phenomenal grandfather to my children, more than I could have ever asked for, thinking that my kids wouldn't have a grandpa, but God's really restored that. But and now currently, and realizing the value issue, thinking that really I'm healed, I'm whole, I've dealt with the aspects as a child being without a father, I'm good, I'm a mother now, and I will make sure that they feel loved, they feel important, that their family's not going anywhere. And as a turning point, a crisis in my life of having my husband walk away from me, and it superimposed itself again, where all of a sudden 22 years ago, and currently they met the father wound and the current wound of, you're not worth fighting for. And I realized that I still had some healing and some truth to speak against the current lie that you can't keep your father, you can't keep your husband, and just like, didn't I do enough? Can't I do enough? That striving again that comes. Can I make them happy enough? Can I keep them? Can I? And now it's opened up an entirely different, God, you get to prove yourself to me as the lover of my soul. And the man that never disappoints, that meets every need, that is more than enough. And it's a whole nother chasm for the Lord to fill. And yet I can now walk my children through those exact fears and those exact concerns, because I know what it feels like. And I get to communicate to my son, aren't we lucky? Because God will never leave us or forsake us. And he's right here with us. And my son comes in my room and holds my hand and says, let's pray, let's talk to Jesus. And he's 3 years old, and I believe that he will know God is his perfect father who will never disappoint or leave. But yes, wounding does affect, as a child, it says who you are, that you are valuable, that you're worth fighting for, that you matter, that you count. And if there's the lack of it, you really struggle through that, but God is able to come in that place and then you walk through your teen years, your adult years, and then, through your own parenting, it has implications on every aspect of life. And I think the first step is acknowledging it and really asking God where he can come in and correct it and bring reconciliation to his heart as a father.